Welcome to Leaders and Learners. My name is Tanya McKenzie, and you can find me at the intersection of public relations and leadership. Join us as we talk to organizational leaders, elected officials, experts, authors, artists, and personalities, sharing their stories, talking about how they got to where they are and how they continue to learn and lead the way. So without further ado, let's get into it. What's up, good people? How you doing out there? Welcome to another edition of Leaders and Learners, where we all know the best leaders are lifetime learners. And I hope you are here today to learn a little something in the realm of leadership, as we always talk about. But I want to preface this with the fact that I'm going to actually let our new guest tell you her story. But more important than her story is how she has used her story to help others. And I implore you all to do the same. Look into really how your story has shaped you, who you are, how you think, how you move through the world, and pick out the lessons and not just the traumas or the troubles that came with your story, but the lessons that it took to get to where you are now. Even if you're not 100% past your story or the things that you've gone through, know that the fact that you have survived them and moved forward to wherever you are now, it is important. There's a lesson in there, and someone that could actually take their lesson and teach it throughout the continental United States is absolutely incredible. Some people are so stuck in where life has wounded them that they have yet to be able to heal, recover, and use that as a lesson. So today, I really want you to sit in the story from Miss Ria Story and know that whatever you have gone through, no matter how tragic, no matter how traumatizing, no matter how fresh sometimes it may still seem, it is a lesson and a blessing for someone else. So thank you for being here, and let me introduce you to Miss Ria Story. How you doing?
I'm so glad to be here, Tanya. Thank you for having me.
Oh man. Listen, I want the crowd to know I get her content, and it usually comes at a time where I need whatever it is that she's dropping, right? And I know some of you probably have issues with your content, like, I don't even know if anybody's listening or reading this, but there is someone that you connect with that is feeling exactly what it is that you are putting out. And for me, that's Ria. I get her content regularly, and I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to chat with her here on Leaders and Learners. So, give the people a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are.
Oh wow, thanks, Tanya. That's a quite a story in itself, no pun intended. I tell people I married my husband for his last name. It's not true, but if you're going to be an author and a speaker, you need a last name like Story. I mean, how perfect that ended up being. But of course, we had no idea when we met and got married this would be the step of our journey. So back even before I met my husband, I was a victim of childhood sexual abuse by my father. And as I got older, the abuse started when I was age 12. And as I got older, he got bolder. And by the time I was 17, he was regularly having sex with me and would bargain with me for sexual favors in exchange for something like a night out with my friends. And he always said in his words that he wanted to give me the ultimate experience in life. And that looked like a lot of different things. Sometimes it was beating me black and blue with a riding crop. Sometimes it was taking nude photographs of me. And sometimes it was trafficking me to men he would meet off of the internet. And there were times when life was almost not worth living. And I thought about it, a tub of warm water and a razor blade. And my story is unfortunately not that uncommon, but my story is not everybody's story. But what I've realized is that we all go through adversity in life. Life can be tough, leadership can be tough. But what happens to us is not as important as who we become because of it. So I left home at 19. I met a knight in a shiny Camaro, and 23 years later, we've long since sold the car, but I kept him. I married him. And I didn't have anything when I left home. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a car. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a high school diploma. I'd never been to school. But I realized I could spend the rest of my life blaming my lack of success on what happened to me, or I could overcome that victim mindset and say, you know what, I can be better or better. Not easy, but it is possible.
Where did you find your strength to tell your story? Because one thing I know for sure is the things that we have no control over as children
Hmm.
can hinder our growth as adults and also obviously hinder our courage. So being able to tell that story has to come from somewhere deep. Like, talk about that because obviously your ability and your need to tell that story superseded your embarrassment,
Mm,
um,
shame.
fear, and shame. Absolutely. Talk about that, please.
Well, I didn't talk about it for many years. After I left home, I didn't want people to see me as a victim. I was afraid people would look at me differently if they knew what I'd been through. I didn't talk about it. I went on and had to go get my GED and got a job waiting tables, and because the only job I could find with no high school diploma and no experience. But I worked my way up, started community college, went on to get a several college degrees and work my way up into my career. And by 2012, I would have considered myself successful. I still didn't talk about my story beyond a few family members and close friends. I didn't talk about it. I didn't share it. And in 2013, my husband and I went down for a leadership conference. And Les Brown, who's an incredible motivational speaker, but he was one of the speakers at the conference, at the event. And he was speaking to this whole room full of people. And he says to this whole conference room full of people, he said, you have a story to share and someone needs to hear your story and you can help that person. And I thought, I got a story, but I worked really hard to leave it behind. I don't want to share it. I don't want to tell it. You can't make me. But I walked away from that with just that seed of an idea, that thought that my story could help people. And it took me 6 months to overcome that shame of what will people see me differently? Is there something wrong with me because of what I've been through? And we went down for a speaker training with Les Brown. And part of the training was you had to create a 60-second speech. And you could say anything you want, but only 60 seconds of speaking because Les Brown says the best speakers make the fewest words go the farthest.
Mm.
So I didn't even tell my husband I was thinking about sharing my story because I wasn't sure I could do it. And the morning of the conference came. It was kind of a contest too. They were going to choose some winners to go speak with later with Les Brown on stage. And the morning of the contest and the conference came, and I had a meltdown in the bathroom, ladies' room, like just mascara running. Like I don't know if I can do this. It just had so much power over me. And I fixed the makeup and go back into the conference room and shared my ended up being 47-second story. And it didn't matter to me if I'd won a contest because I'd won such a much greater victory inside myself at that point. But I did win. As it turns out, I was one of the 5 winners chosen and invited to speak in Los Angeles with Les Brown a few months later. And 10 days after sharing my story publicly there for the first time, I resigned from that job I'd gone to college for 10 years to get because I discovered the difference between a career and a calling. And I realized there were other people who could learn from, my journey and saying what happens to us is not as important as who we become because of it. Do the things that happen in life influence us? Absolutely. But they don't determine us. And if I could give everybody that one most powerful lesson is that the things that impact us don't determine us. They don't define us and they don't determine our future. So that is, it's incredibly powerful and powerfully freeing concept, realizing that history is not destiny. I can change. I just simply have to start making the changes.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. With your father having sex with you and abusing you as a child, did you know that was wrong?
There definitely is something inside us that says this is not right. And I think inherently we know if we have to cover up something from everyone else, that's a red flag. Like that doesn't feel good when we have to not tell people. He would tell me I shouldn't tell anyone because they wouldn't understand. And um, you know, there's something inside me even and then that said this is not right. This doesn't feel right. But growing up in that environment, when we're growing up, whatever we're growing up in is our normal. We don't often realize that this is not really normal until we have a different perspective.
When did that happen? When did you realize what is happening to me is wrong? This is not okay, and I don't like how it feels.
I don't know that I consciously really had. I knew I didn't like how it felt, like from the very beginning. But consciously thinking this is, absolutely wrong. I probably was about 15 before I was realizing, hey, this is not what I want. This is not what I want, right? This is not my choice. And, by the time I was 16 and even 17, I was looking, desperate to get out. Like, am I ever going to be able to get out? And, I wasn't allowed to date or anything. And so being homeschooled and we didn't go to church or anything like that. So there weren't a lot of outside opportunity, social interactions anyway. And I was, just desperate for that. And that's when life just seemed so dark because I couldn't ever see that I would get out. Sometimes when we don't have hope, right, we have to just realize we have to keep going. It's like going through a deep fog when we're in that sense of darkness and saying, I don't know if life is going to get better, right? But we have to keep going. We have to keep one foot at a time in front of the other,
Some people don't.
moving forward.
But some people don't. So what kept
Hmm.
you moving forward?
If you're a person of faith, I think that that's a big part of my story and just realizing, for me, God doesn't cause the pain in our lives, but He can use it. And that's been a part of my journey is just saying, you know, pain has a purpose, not that it was intended, but it can be, if I can share my story and help other people learn to overcome what's a horrible thing becomes something useful, something helpful. And I think that's really what helped me overcome. Now, to begin with, at 19 years old and just leaving home, I just kind of shoved it all up in the closet and locked it away and said, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to deal with it. And that's not really healing. That's surviving. It's coping,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily overcoming. Resilience is the difference between I didn't die when something bad happens and I learned to live again.
Live.
And it
Yes.
took many years of working on me to get to that point.
Let me ask you this. Adulting is hard. Okay. We understand adulting is hard. And we're going to talk about leadership. But I want you to reflect on leadership in the form of parenting.
Mm,
I feel like we are losing the leadership in parenting, meaning there are people trying to actually be their children's friends instead of parent them.
mhm.
And if you don't parent them and teach them, then the world will teach them their way. Where do you feel like the balance is between leadership and friendship with your kids in parenting? How do you get people to recognize what's the best way to get people to understand you do have to lead? This is a
Mm.
moment where you, as much as you want to be your child's friend, as much as you want to be seen as the cool mom or soft parenting, whatever your style is, where is that leadership necessity when it comes to parenting?
I think, first of all, I love how John Maxwell defines leadership. Leadership is influence. And that's so applicable for parents, right? Absolutely. We want to influence our kids to make better choices in life. But how we do that is going to determine, are we driving them away or are we increasing our influence with them? And just like a leader of an organization can't be best buddies with the team, I mean, they are the leader. And so there has to be boundaries. I think that boundaries are just as applicable for a parent. But it's realizing and helping that young person realize that either I as the leader or I as the parent, I'm going to do things that you're not always going to like, But if I'm that parent who wants to increase my influence with you and lead you in such a way that I strengthen our relationship and the trust between us, I'm going to explain and help you think through why I'm doing this thing, why I'm making the decisions like you can't go out at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, it's not because I want to keep you from having fun in life, but it's because this nothing good happens at 2 o'clock
And
in
I
the
want you to
morning.
live so that if that's what you want to do later, you can.
Right. And I think we have to, as a parent, we have to do that. Number one, hopefully on the front end as much as possible, right? Be intentional about strengthening a relationship, but helping that person learn to develop and think for themselves. What are the possible consequences of this decision? And, it's almost like we can learn to delegate with our children just as much as we can learn to delegate as leaders by saying, you know what, hey, if you want to go out on Friday night, why don't you think through what are the benefits? What are the possible downsides? And then let's ask questions and talk through this and then come to a decision. Is this the best thing for you? And yeah, there are going to be times when you have to be willing to say no, and that's not going to be a popular decision. But if you're the parent or if you're the leader, your job isn't to make everybody happy. It's to get results. And in a parenting perspective, it's helping that child be safe and develop into the best person they have potential to be.
Let me take you back just a little bit because I love what you said in regards to John Maxwell and parenting and influence.
Mhm.
Even though it was negative, what kind of influence did your father have on you?
Most of it was learning how I don't want to be, right? Negative in the sense of a poor example. Beyond the abuse itself, growing up in the home environment, my parents were both emotionally very reactive, and so it's Covey who says between stimulus and response, human beings have the freedom to pause and choose our response. And it's Andy Stanley who reminds us our feelings can be terrible leaders.
Mm,
We have emotions. Everybody does. We're human. That's normal. But when we choose to respond to any situation based on the emotion of the moment, that usually doesn't serve us very well. And then I bet I'm not the only one who said or done something in the heat of the moment and thought, "Oh, shouldn't have said that, shouldn't have done that." But neither one of my parents had developed any proactive mind muscles. And so, there was always something going wrong, and it was always a chaos and yelling and fussing and, you know, just emotionally turbulent. And that was one thing that impacted me pretty strongly, is that it taught me, hey, regardless of what's going on around me, I don't have to let, my emotions just blow up all over everything or everybody. I can choose to just be calm and steady. And I could not have said that early on as a teenager. I probably couldn't have explained that until I was mid 30s.
yeah.
But I learned how to be proactive in a large sense by watching two reactive parents show me what not to do. Um,
So your mom was around. She was
mhm,
around
yep.
when all of this was going on. What?
Mhm.
How? How?
Well, she stands by him to this day. So um, it's unfortunate. After I left home, I had um, one or two conversations with my mom, and finally, I shared with her what had been going on, and I have no idea how she could not have known, because there were people in the family who saw some things. My friends' parents noticed something wasn't right, but no one really wanted to get involved. But a lot of people noticed there were some signs that things weren't right. So I can't imagine that she lived in the house and did not suspect. But after I left home and I shared with her a little bit about it and what was going on, her first reaction was to just blame me and said,
Mm.
that this was my fault. I had manipulated him into doing that. And at that point, I just said, you know what, I don't come back. I don't need a relationship with you. And I haven't talked to either of them in more than 20 years.
So Maggie says our feelings can be terrible leaders. Yes, Adam Stanley. Thinking emotional intelligence. Have you been speaking on that? That seems to be an underrated quality. Emotional intelligence. Where is it, America? Where is it?
It is so powerful. Thank you, Maggie. Hey, Maggie. And Maggie's exactly right, right? That thinking emotional intelligence, because in a leadership role, leaders don't have to be perfect and they are going to make mistakes, but leaders have responsibility for leading themselves well. And that is the emotional intelligence. Number one, self awareness. I need to recognize where I am emotionally. Number two, I need to be able to control that. I need to be able to hit my own pause button and respond to the situation based on what's best for the individual, what's best for the team. I have to consider both of those things. And as a leader, and it's tough, I realize it's tough. But as the leader, I have that responsibility to the organization and the individual to be proactive. And so much easier said than done, but it is possible.
Listen, for years on years on years, they've tried to act like women cannot lead because we're
Mm,
so emotional. But I would actually say yes, we're emotional, but we have emotional intelligence.
mhm.
Those other people seem to lack that sometimes when they are face to face with their own emotions.
Mm.
I mean, it can listen, am I tripping or what?
N- I would agree with you. And Mac and I have this conversation, and he agrees with me. I think that when it comes to leadership and influence, women have a little bit of a natural head start. And here's why. Women just by nature do have emotion, maybe a little more expressive emotions, but they're also more nurturing by nature. And it's not a feminism statement. It's just a fact. Women by nature tend to be a little more relational oriented.
Yes.
And that's a strength, because if leadership is influence, influence is built on relationships. Relationships are based on trust. If you don't know me, you're not going to trust me very much. I can't influence you very well. Well, the problem is that women in the corporate world or professional world are often told that they're too soft. And so as a female leader or woman leader, I have to learn how to balance the relationship with the individual and having them know that I care about them as a person, not just as two hands doing a job, but balance that with getting results. The job does have to get done in an organizational setting. If I'm the leader, I have to make sure the leader gets, the leader is getting the job done for the organization, but it's the balance, right? Back to the parenting thing. I have to discipline the child, but it's how I do that that says, am I building trust and influence with you or destroying it? And I think that's where women naturally are relationship oriented, but they don't always intuitively know, how do I balance that with getting results and not crossing the line and being too hard, but also not being too soft. We have to balance both.
I love that. Listen, Ria, I feel like things in our government right now are just off kilter. And as someone that trains and speaks on leadership on a regular basis, what do you see is going right? We'll start there. And then what do you see is going wrong and how do we course correct?
Sure, that's a great question. I touch on this a little bit in, not specifically with government, but in my book, The Ladder of Influence, where I talk about how do I, as an individual, increase my influence or my leadership with other people. And the first step we've already talked about, control of self. And then the second step is developing character, because I have to develop who I am as a person, because who I am as a person determines how I do what I do as a leader, as a person. So what's going right? I mean, I particularly those people, if you're living in the United States and you've been to other countries, my perspective is this is an incredibly amazing place for people to work, because if you're willing to put the work in, you can be successful. And I'm living proof, right? I mean, I left home at 19 with nothing, no high school diploma, no money, no job skills, nothing. And I worked, up into a very successful career as in compliance and regulatory affairs. And now I travel all over and talk to people. So yeah, it's possible to grow and develop yourself. And there are opportunities here to do it if you're willing to put the work in. And that's absolutely something that's going right here in our country. What's not going right? I think that we have gotten away as a society from character based principles and values. And when I say that, a lot of times people, when I say character, they think, oh, character is just, are you good or bad? And that's not, that's a very simple definition. I love Henry Cloud's definition of character. Character is the ability to meet the demands of reality. And he goes on to say integrity is the courage to do so.
Hmm.
And I think we've moved away from that as a culture, as a society. We don't talk about character. And character is how I do what I do. And it's funny we call them soft skills, but it's things like attitude and integrity and what are my values? Do I value helping other people?
Really quick, I hate to interrupt, but I want to,
Sure.
while you're here, I want to ask you, do you think that social media has played a part in devaluing character? Because you can actually just create a character, even though that's not your real character. You can create a character on social media. You can create a character to get attention. You can create a character to get clicks. And even in our politics now, it seems like people are creating characters for popularity in media rather
Mhm.
than having character in the work that they do. Like
Yes, I think social media has played a part in that because social media is a heavy influence.
influence. There's that word again.
And we have to be careful what we allow to influence us because what's influencing us emotionally is going to determine how we think, how we feel, what we say, what we do. And that determines our behaviors and actions. And that's affecting our results in life. So people will tell me, oh, I don't get on Facebook. It's so negative. I'm like, well, quit following negative people. You're controlling this device. It doesn't control you. So, but if, there again, the individual has to take responsibility and saying, if I don't want this influence in my life that's negative or depressing or, whatever, I need to get rid of it. So minimize it or put boundaries on it, move away from it. But yeah, I think social media, because it is a strong influence, and if there again, anything can be detrimental if we do too much of it or for the wrong reasons.
I
Social
would
media is one example. Oh, go ahead.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask, where do you stand on affirmative action? Do you speak on DEI issues? And how does it play a role in productivity and profitability in organizations?
Short answer is no, I don't really. Not I don't really speak on it in the sense that you mean, I think. What I like to focus on is the individual taking responsibility and ownership for themselves and developing their character. Because if I'm developing myself and growing myself, that will change who I am inside and that's going to determine how I interact with people outside. And if I value other people, then I don't have to teach about having a DEI program because if I'm developing everyone in the organization to have respect for an individual, that's a foundational character trait is learning to have empathy and to be able to see things from a different perspective. So that's kind of the message. So in that sense, it's in everything that I want to talk about, right? Is the individual taking responsibility for themselves and developing themselves, because as leaders, if we're not helping our people grow and develop, we can't blame them. But we see so many times it's easy to blame other people, right? But as long as we're blaming other people for something in our environment, our circumstances, we're not going to do anything to fix it. And I can't worry about blaming anybody else because I can't control anybody else. Believe me, I tried. All I can do is say I can take responsibility for the choices that I make as an individual, and if I make the right choices in alignment with natural laws and principles, I can increase my influence with the people who have the strong values that I want to develop. It's like gravity. Gravity is a principle. Even if I don't know what gravity is, or I would tell you there's no such thing as gravity, gravity applies. Leadership principles and personal growth principles are the same thing. If I can grow in my character and apply these principles and get better at it, I can work with gravity instead of against it. My life will get better. Quit blaming everybody else for what's going around and saying, you know what can I do? Because the moment I'm blaming someone or something else, I'm giving away my power to change it. I don't have to be somebody to change the whole world, right? I just have to change my corner of the world. But how I do that is starting with the change here. And we all
What
can
if
do
you can't,
that.
what if it doesn't change? What if you do the best that you can and the situation doesn't change? I had another guest, and the best advice that he gave is pick your battles. Even if you are going through something at an organization and you are your best self, you have done the work, you've made the changes, and you see that those circumstances are not changing, at what point do you either, from in your opinion,
Mhm.
continue to fight to make the change or leave?
Uh, from an organizational perspective, or in an organization, professional environment, I should say, the moment that I cannot be 100% committed to the team and the leader that I'm following, then I need to find a different team. Now, it's my choice as an individual if I want to stay here and I want to pick my battles and I want to try to improve circumstances at this culture, at this company, at this organization. I absolutely have the freedom to do that. And I can grow my influence. It's difficult to grow influence up if I'm not the top level leader. It's going to take a long time. It can be frustrating. It can be slow. I can do it. But at some point, what if I say, you know what, this is not a great leader, and I can't change that because I can't change anybody else. I can't make that leader values, the right have the right leadership values. Then I, as the individual, have a responsibility to say, you know what, if I'm not following that leader any longer, if I don't respect the leader, if I don't have respect for the leader, but the leader's position, then I need to develop myself and move on to another opportunity. So if I'm not able to play on the field 100%, then it's time to move on because that's where I have the responsibility and control. Because if I stay and I'm not committed to the team, I'm just going to be miserable
Yep,
at the end of the day.
I love
And I
that.
think that's, sure, there are going to be time. I mean, I've worked for leaders who were not great leaders and can't change them. Maybe I can influence them, but if I come to the point of realizing I no longer want to try, then I, love you, but I'm gonna miss you, and I'm moving on.
Absolutely. Maggie says, such a beautiful discussion, much needed. Should think about expanding this to a panel. This is so healthy and helpful. And Maggie, I think I will, and hopefully Ria will be able to join us. But before we get out of here, I love having this conversation with you. I'm glad Maggie and others are also enjoying it. Let the people know how they can continue to follow you, support you. Y'all make sure you get on her newsletter on LinkedIn, um, and be a part of what you have going on or bring you into their organization because obviously what you have to say is definitely of value.
Oh, thank you. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Ria Story. Facebook also, just search Ria Story. I'm on Twitter, Ria_story. Instagram, Ria.story. You can pretty much just find me. But the best way to get in touch with me is on my website. My phone number is there. If you want to have a conversation about leadership and personal growth, connect with me. And absolutely, that's the best way to get in touch with me. You can also just check out some of the books that I have available. Don't No email required, no spam. I'm not going to put you on an email list, but you can go to riastory.com/download and download free samples of material from most of my books. Because if I could leave you with one call to action, it would be intentional about your growth because that's where we have the power to increase our influence. And when we develop more influence in life, we get more options in life, we get more opportunities in life, and life gets better when we have more influence, options, and opportunities.
Influence. There's that word, guys. There's that word. And her website is right below on the ticker. And all of the information that she has shared will be in captions. So please make sure that you connect. Miss Maggie says, I also want to know how I can go back and listen. I'll send that to you, Miss Maggie. But definitely want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for your time, for not blocking me because I just stalk you so much. Listen, I love smart people. I love people that can think and process information, not those that are so influenced by what they see on social media that they just take that
Mm.
at its word and that's the law. Like, no, I need us to do better, especially us women. Like, I need us to do better. I need us to do better about ourselves, our own personal business, our own personal growth, but be better about each other. Like, you cannot have outside stuff influencing your inside voice. Okay.
Mm.
Like, let's make sure that we are getting information, processing it, getting help if we don't understand. You're not expected to understand everything or how to do everything. Even if you're having situations at an organization, if you don't know the fix, look, there are mentors out there. There are amazing people out there that can help guide you through some of these old sticky, nasty situations
Mhm.
that we find ourselves in. So we don't give up, but we actually meet those goals of exceeding and excelling where we were to begin with. It's important to know you don't have to give up. Look, Ria Story tells you, you don't give up. You show resilience. You fight through. You strategically get where it is that you're trying to go in this life. And truthfully, there is no excuse. We have actions over excuses, and you have people here to help you do that. So, girl, let me get off my soapbox. Thank you so much for being here. I super appreciate you. And I look forward to staying connected.
Absolutely, Tanya. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a
Keep
good
climbing.
Yes. Hey, thanks for showing up to the podcast where we all know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. When you get a sec, take a moment, leave a comment. What do you think about today's episode? And share it with someone that you know could use the gems that were dropped today. Follow and subscribe. You don't want to miss who's coming up next. You never know who could show up here and what they could say. For your professional needs, marketing, PR, communications, and leadership, make sure you follow us on all social media platforms at Sand and Shores, or hit us up at sandandshores.com. Again, thanks so much for showing up. We appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.